It began when I was just 7 years old, which feels like a lifetime ago, 20 years to be exact. Back then, I was an inquisitive child, always wandering through the fields that belonged to our family, making my way toward the forest, past the wide stretches of grass. I'd gather stones, observe wildlife, and wade through the creeks I stumbled upon, most often all alone. I never minded the solitude, maybe because it was all I ever knew. My parents ran a farm, an immense property that stretched endlessly in every direction. It was breathtaking, with sunlight casting golden hues across the soft green rows of corn behind our home. My father spent his days working hard, nurturing the crops with a small team of laborers. My mother handled the home and would occasionally drive into town to pick up supplies. They were devoted to each other and to the life they had built. They needed each other, and their love was strong. During the academic year, I'd ride into town with my mother or our neighbor who rotated school runs with Trevor's family. Trevor, my only friend, was the same age as me. In the summertime, I rarely saw him. He had chores of his own, keeping him busy on his family's land 8 miles down the unpaved road. Sometimes, our families would gather for a large homemade meal, and Trevor and I would scarf down our portions before rushing off to play. I was a joyful child, satisfied with how things were. I don't remember ever feeling truly alone or deeply sad. My parents treated me well, and the vast land surrounding us gave my adventurous spirit endless room to roam. We lived along a narrow dirt path, far from the town and far from everything else. Behind our low-built house were the cornfields, endless rows that reached out as far as the eye could see, or at least that's how I recall it. I often worried about losing my way in the tall, confining plants whenever I had to retrieve Dad for dinner. The dense stalks towered above my head. In front of our home stretched a wide, flat expanse of grass that went on for acres before finally reaching the forest where the trees thickened. I loved exploring that forest. Most of my summer days were spent wandering deeper into its sticky, resinous depths. But this isn't a story about the woods. This is about the cornfields. This is about the house that mysteriously appeared in the field across the road. Like I mentioned, I was 7 when it showed up out of nowhere. I remember falling asleep one humid June evening. When I finally drifted off, my rest didn't last. I awoke in the middle of the night, my throat dry from the heavy air. As I went to get some water, I passed by my bedroom window, and that's when I saw it for the first time. The first thing that caught my attention was its height. 3 full levels, its peak stretching up toward the starry night above. At that time, it was the tallest house I had ever laid eyes on. My fingers clutched the window frame, nose pressed to the cold glass, as I stared in awe at this strange new sight. It sat just across the dusty road from our home, only a short distance from the front steps. By daylight, I'd see it was painted pitch black and looked strangely pristine. Its shadowy windows were bordered by awful yellow shutters, which in the moon's glow looked like rot creeping along its edges. There was no front porch, only a lone, ugly door matching those terrible shutters. I gazed at it, my young imagination already spinning with excitement over the mystery. The next morning already felt like it would be filled with adventure. But of course I couldn't go there. That was someone's home. Someone clearly lived there. As those thoughts dimmed my anticipation, I thought of waking my parents to tell them what I saw. Back then, the idea of a house just appearing across from ours was nothing short of thrilling. I didn't find it frightening or strange. To me, it simply happened, and I accepted it the way any 7-year-old would. I got my water and went back to bed, my thoughts racing with endless curiosity. When the sun began creeping into the sky, staining it with deep purples and faint pinks, I shot out the door. I darted to my window to confirm I hadn't imagined it. The house remained there, still and shadowy. I tore into the kitchen, nearly bumping into my dad, eager to share what I had found. To me, it felt like a secret only I had uncovered, like it had appeared just for me. Dad, clearly annoyed by my early energy, gave me a stern look before I blurted out my question. I asked if he'd noticed the house, speaking quickly as I dragged him toward the entrance. I threw open the door and pointed across the road, my feet thumping down the porch steps. My father paused at the doorway, scanning the field, his expression uncertain. He glanced down at me with concern, then back at the open land. He scratched at his beard and signaled for me to come inside, telling me to quit the nonsense, and if I had that much energy, I should come help him in the fields. He couldn't see it. At that age, I couldn't make sense of it. It was there, right there. I kept pointing, kept trying to explain, but none of it mattered. He just couldn't see it. This left me both baffled and upset. I couldn't understand why he couldn't see it. I wanted so badly for him to recognize what I had discovered in the dead of night. But no matter how much I explained or pleaded, it made no difference. I ended up spending the day out the cornfields with my dad. Not long after breakfast, 3 of the regular workers showed up, and we all headed back out to begin the day's tasks. If they noticed the house, none of them gave any hint of it. I even asked Louis, the longest serving of the farmhands, if he had spotted anything unusual when he came by. He chuckled, messed up my hair, and said the only surprise he'd seen that morning was me being up so early. I pulled away from him, frustrated that no one else could see it. As I carried on with my duties, my mind stayed fixed on that building, the way it stood so silently in the tall grass, its towering form practically inviting someone to explore. I longed to tell Trevor, though I knew I wouldn't see him today. He'd believe me. He'd definitely be able to see it. I was sure of it. Trevor and I shared the same adventurous spirit, and I knew the next time we met, we'd spend every moment talking about it, and maybe even sneaking a closer look. There was something so compelling about it, I felt almost magnetically drawn toward it. Though I couldn't glimpse it through the rows of corn, I could pinpoint its exact location no matter where I stood. The sun crawled slowly across the sky, each hour dragging on until, at last, my father said it was time to stop for the day. I walked beside him on the way back home, listening as he chatted with the others about tomorrow's work and when they'd return. They stepped onto the back porch and were greeted by my mom, who handed each of them a cold beer, earning wide grins all around. Still tired and a little annoyed, I wandered around the house, eager to take one more glance at the black house with those awful yellow shutters. But as I turned the corner, I froze completely. The house had vanished. I rubbed at my eyes, thinking maybe I was imagining things. But when I looked again, the field was just as before, empty, with tall grass shifting like waves under a gentle breeze. I spun in a full circle, eyes scanning every inch of the horizon, wondering if I had simply forgotten where it was. But all I saw was grass ahead and corn behind. I squinted hard, searching the far tree line beyond the field in front of our house, but nothing caught my eye. Feeling defeated, I kicked at the dusty ground, now certain Trevor wouldn't believe me. I had been so eager to show him aching for someone, anyone, to witness this bizarre and incredible occurrence. I remembered swearing for the first time that day. Right after I did it, I glanced around nervously to check if my mom had overheard me. Her voice drifted toward me through the warm air, and a wave of relief passed over me as I realized she was still out on the back porch. So I did it again, secretly enjoying the way it made me feel bold. Letting out a sigh, I sunk my hands into my pockets and leaned my head back to gaze at the dusky sky. A storm was creeping in from the west, down the dirt lane where Trevor and his folks lived. I watched as thick black clouds tumbled over each other, the air flinching under the distant rumble of thunder. That night, the storm finally reached us. Rain hammered the house, and lightning ripped through the sky. Streaks of white fire followed by booming crashes like exploding cannons. I sat upright in my bed, a little uneasy, thinking about whether I should head to my parents' room. Dad was likely snoring through it all, but Mom might still be awake. Still, I didn't want them to know I was scared. After all, I was 7 now. Another thunderous boom echoed across the sky, and I slipped from my bed and walked to the window, forcing myself to stare out at what frightened me. My dad had always told me that courage is born when you face the very thing that makes you want to flee. So I stood firm at the window, watching the wild chaos unfold outside. The wind shrieked, making the whole house shake, and I listened as rain pounded the roof like a stampede of galloping horses overhead. A bolt of lightning split the darkness again, its brilliance so sudden that I blinked, and that's when I saw it. The house was there again. I pressed my face to the window pane, trying to peer through the rain-drenched glass. I could trace its outline, a dark square carved out of the night, and I waited breathlessly for another flash of light. My heart pounded, a spark of thrill rising in my chest. It had returned. I knew I wasn't imagining things. I wanted to rush to my parents, to shout that I was right, that a house truly stood across the road. But the idea of waking my father in the middle of the night stopped me cold. I stayed put. A few tense moments later, another flare of lightning lit up the sky, and I locked my eyes on the house during that brief, vivid second. The front door was swung wide open. I don't know why, but the sight of that open door filled me with dread. Something felt deeply off. People don't just leave their doors wide open during violent storms, and yet there it was, gaping, letting the rain and wind sweep into the pitch blackness within. A sick feeling twisted through my stomach, and I swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow in my room. I held on to the windowsill tightly, waiting for the next strike of light. It came moments later, revealing the house again, But this time, something was there, in the doorway, facing me. The storm made it hard to see, but I could tell it was large, shaped like a person, yet smeared with colors, like a swirling, shifting silhouette made of something not quite human. I lunged toward my bed, any illusion of courage crumbling in seconds, and buried myself under the blankets. Trembling, I lay there feeling as though I'd witnessed something forbidden. By the next morning, the house had vanished again. A part of me felt relieved. It gave my young mind space to process what I'd experienced. I kept replaying the moment again and again, my imagination trying to paint in features on the human-like blur. But no matter how many shapes I created, they were always wiped away by the stark truth in my memory. I had absolutely no idea what I had seen. I munched my breakfast in the kitchen, half listening to my parents as they chatted about the day's agenda. My attention snapped into focus when my mom mentioned the Harveys coming over for dinner. That meant Trevor would be there. Finally, I'd get to tell him everything. Excitement quickly swept away the lingering fear from the night before, and I inhaled the rest of my pancakes in just a few bites. Dad said he wouldn't be needing my help that day, so after helping Mom wash the dishes, I bolted out the front door toward the woods. Now that the house had vanished again, the day felt like just another magical summer morning, full of promise and adventure. Should I go for a swim? Build a hideout? Maybe Trevor and I could play explorers later. Laughing and shouting, I raced across the open field toward the trees. As I neared the spot where the strange house had appeared, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if it popped up again with me standing right over it. Would I be transported inside instantly, or tossed into the air like a rag doll as it burst through the earth? Feeling suddenly anxious, I picked up my pace and dashed over the place where it had stood. The rest of the day flew by in a blur of sun and imagination. I spent hours splashing in a nearby stream, collecting smooth stones, and pretending I was locked in battle with swashbuckling pirates. It turned into one of those golden childhood days that you remember forever. Everything felt perfect, a day made of dreams and play. As I got lost in whatever fantasy I was acting out, the thought of that mysterious house melted from my mind, erased by heat and joy. The sun climbed high until it scorched the sky, then slowly began its descent, sinking toward the earth in a swirl of colors like dripping popsicles. I hadn't noticed how late it had gotten, or how hungry I was. Tossing the last of my stones into the stream, I turned back toward home. I wondered if Trevor and his family had arrived yet. I glanced at the sky, trying to guess the time. Judging by the growling in my belly, it had to be dinner time. I broke through the edge of the woods and was just about to sprint the rest of the way when I stopped. The house had returned, but something about it was off. Now it was facing me. A wave of dread slithered across the ground and crawled up my legs. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Its front had always pointed toward my house. Why the change? I swallowed, nervous, as the strange home now blocked the view of my own. My eyes scanned the vacant windows, seeking any movement, any glimpse of the figure from the storm. But the house stood utterly still. I began circling it at a safe distance, my focus never leaving the front door. Every step, I braced myself for it to fling open and for something inhuman to lunge at me, but the door stayed shut. Nothing stirred. When I reached the halfway point, I bolted toward my porch. My legs tore through the tall grass, shoes digging into damp earth as I tore my gaze away from the house and fixed it ahead. Gasping, I scrambled up the porch steps, gulping down the cool dusk air. When I turned, I nearly stumbled. It was facing me again. I stared, breathless, frozen, waiting for some kind of movement. In my imagination, the house wasn't just a building. It was some sentient creature silently watching. I didn't understand its purpose or intent, but I was certain it wasn't safe. Turning my back, I stepped inside. A wave of warm air and delicious smells welcomed me. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, voices blending in cheerful conversation. I entered the dining room, and my mom, busy at the stove, reminded me I'd kept Trevor waiting. I mumbled greetings to Trevor's parents, who smiled and nodded before resuming their animated discussion with my folks. I headed to the bathroom to wash up, Trevor following, animatedly describing a fort he was building in the woods near my home. I shared tales from my day, and we quickly began plotting sleepovers, hoping tonight would be one of those times. As I dried my hands, I asked him if he'd seen anything unusual on his walk over. He gave me a puzzled look, so I guided him to the front door. Swinging it open, I pointed across the field to the odd green house with yellow shutters. Nervously, I asked if he saw it too. He laughed and clapped me on the shoulder, assuring me he could absolutely see it. A rush of relief swept over me. Stepping onto the porch with him, I started recounting my strange encounters with the eerie house. His eyes widened, a huge grin spreading across his face. The more I told, the more excited he became. He asked if I had ventured closer or checked to see if the place could be entered. I shook my head firmly, telling him just how deeply the house terrified me. I warned him it wasn't safe, that there was something off about that house. I explained how my parents couldn't even see it, and that something had been watching me during the storm. But that only fueled his curiosity, making him more eager to check it out. I tried to dissuade him, but then my dad called for me to help set the table. Grumbling, I did as I was told, and the discussion ended. Trevor assisted me with pouring water into the glasses, and soon everyone had gathered around a table piled with hot, fragrant food. I wasn't interested in the feast before me. It was merely a delay to me and Trevor having our fun. Ignoring the effort put into the meal, I dug in furiously once my father finished saying grace. My mother gave me a few disapproving glances as I shoved food into my mouth and washed it down with gulps of water. When I'd cleaned my plate, I noticed Trevor had done the same. I waited a respectful moment before asking if we could be excused. My father waved us off, throwing in a comment about my terrible manners, but I hardly heard him as Trevor and I raced for the door. The sky above was painted with shades of deep indigo and fading violet as the sun dipped beyond the horizon. Stars peeked through the darkening canvas like tiny lanterns, flickering gently to the symphony of insects humming their nightly tune. Trevor and I settled on the porch steps, giving our full stomachs a bit of rest. We kept our eyes on the shadowed house across the way, watching for any hint of movement. The moon beamed in the dusk, casting a glow over the field, joined by dozens of blinking fireflies. Trevor, visibly eager, voiced his interest in peeking through the windows, boasting about how brave he was. I shook my head, certain that something sinister surrounded that eerie structure. It was a feeling in my gut, a knot that returned every time I remembered what I'd seen during the storm. After a failed attempt to reason with him, Trevor suddenly stood and said he was going to check it out alone. I snapped my eyes to his and quickly objected, telling him not to go. But no matter what I said, he was determined. He mocked me, calling me a scaredy cat, flapping his arms and clucking as he danced around the porch. His teasing didn't sway me. I kept shaking my head, firm in my refusal. Finally, he stopped clowning around, stepped off the porch, and gave me a wink and a thumbs up, calling me a baby as he went. I watched him cross the yard, my pulse picking up speed. I had the urge to run after him or alert my parents. But what would they do? They'd just see him heading toward an empty patch of grass, and my dad would probably smack me on the back of the head. He was 30 feet from the old house, just a shadow in the fading twilight, barely more than a dark blur in motion. I could make out that he was speaking to me, but the night devoured his voice. Now just 20 feet away, his steps were growing hesitant. My throat tightened, dry and constricted, as panic crept higher in my chest. This was a mistake, a huge, terrifying mistake. My hands clenched into little fists, slick with nervous sweat. 10 feet left. No sounds, not even the chirp of crickets. The house loomed like a sleeping monster, still and brooding. Its faded yellow shutters looked like brittle teeth, the color strangely vivid against the dark. Trevor was nearly there, edging cautiously to the right of the front entrance, his destination, a ground floor window. That's when I noticed something in the top left window on the 3rd floor. It resembled a flickering candle, a soft flame breaking through the thick blackness. It hovered there in the center of the pane before starting to drift. I watched, frozen, as it glided from one window to the next before vanishing completely. In a panic, I shouted for Trevor to stop, bolting down the porch steps and into the yard. He was just about to peer inside when he heard me, pausing and starting to turn back. I dashed across the road and stumbled into the tall grass, waving both arms to urge him toward me. The light had moved to the 2nd floor now, its soft beam gliding past each pane, steadily approaching. Too afraid to take another step, I shifted nervously, heart pounding like a drum. My expression twisted into pure fear. Trevor called out, confused, asking what was wrong. I yelled that he needed to run, that something was coming for him, that it wasn't safe. Then I swore at him. It was the only thing I could think of that would cut through his stubbornness. The curse snapped him to attention, and he finally began jogging toward me, glancing back as he moved. The light had vanished again, but as he neared, I saw it blink on at the window he'd been about to investigate. It hovered there, motionless in the gloom, and I felt an unseen gaze fix on me from within. Trevor reached my side, breathless and alarmed. I clutched his arm and turned him to face the house. The moment he caught sight of the glow, the entire structure went black. We stood frozen, breathing hard, shaken to the core. I asked if he saw it. His slow nod was all the confirmation I needed. Whatever it was, it had noticed us, and I felt exposed. The swollen moon acted like a spotlight, making me feel like I was standing center stage under the gaze of whatever was inside that house. We turned and sprinted toward my home, a mutual unspoken shame between us, like we'd crossed a line we never should have approached. The dread of being caught, the panic of facing consequences consumed us as we rushed up the porch and pushed our way back indoors. I probably should have said something to my parents then. Even if they couldn't understand the house itself, I feel like I should have tried to describe what we'd seen. Maybe a trace of sincerity would have broken through just enough for them to believe a little. But I didn't. Neither of us said a word. We both knew sneaking around was wrong, and if they did believe us, we'd still be in trouble. As we sat at the dinner table, now crowded with warm pies, Trevor and I shared a glance that promised we'd stay completely quiet. Our parents asked why we were back so early, Trevor's mom teasing that maybe the smell of dessert had pulled us in. My appetite was gone, my stomach tangled with nerves, but I forced hot cherry pie into my mouth anyway, tasting none of it. I couldn't shake the fear that someone from that house or greenhouse would show up at the door and tell our parents everything. It was the irrational fear that all kids know too well, that looming sense of doom tied to getting in trouble. After dinner, I asked my parents if Trevor could sleep over. After some back and forth among the adults, they said yes, even agreeing to let him stay 2 nights. Apparently, Trevor's dad needed to borrow our tractor, but we still needed it for a few more days. So once we were done, my dad would drive the tractor to them and drop Trevor off at the same time. My nerves calmed a little. The idea of spending 2 nights together filled me with joy and pushed the fear into the background. We cheered and bounced through the house until my dad barked for us to settle down. We hurried up to my room and immediately started brainstorming for the visit. With so much time to ourselves, we decided we'd start building a tree fort in the woods the very next day. We scribbled out rough plans in crayon, both of us lying flat on our stomachs, our heads bumping as we huddled over the paper. We invented elaborate stories about who we were and why we needed the fort, our wild imaginations creating entire plots with heroes and enemies. The thrill of it all, combined with the sugar from the pie, made me feel like I might explode from happiness. Thinking back, it was one of those perfect childhood moments. Just you, your best friend, and a whole world waiting to be imagined. At last, we heard his parents call him to say their goodbyes, reminding him to behave and listen to my mom and dad. While I waited for him to return, I cast a glance out my bedroom window. The house was gone again. It was the middle of the night. Trevor was snoring softly in the sleeping bag my mom had prepared for him. He was curled up tightly, his head barely visible from the opening. I couldn't understand why I was still awake. The house around me was quiet, my parents deep in sleep. Even with Trevor there, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear, like something was lurking just beyond our reach. I stared at the corners of the closet and the slightly open door to my room. Shadows twisted into monstrous shapes and then faded as my eyes adjusted. I considered waking Trevor, But I didn't want to risk being called a coward again. It felt as if I were exposed, like something unseen was watching me, something out by the window. I dared a quick glance in that direction, but only the moonlight seeped through. No faces were pressed against the glass, no glowing candle illuminating the darkness. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, a chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to be thinking about it, not with the night so still and the silence pressing in around me. Yet, there was something about the window that was calling me, something drawing me to it. It was as though a physical force was tugging at me, urging me to approach. I resisted for a moment, but I knew I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep unless I gave in. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, careful not to step on Trevor's head. I crept toward the window, and with every step, dread started to rise inside me like bile in my throat. My mind kept repeating a simple plea, "Go back to bed." Over and over, the thought echoed through me, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." Reaching the window, I peered out, and the scream that surged in my throat was muffled as I clamped my hands over my mouth. My heart thundered in my chest, and nausea gripped me with overwhelming terror. To this day, the memory of what I saw that night still haunts me. The house had returned, standing as it always had, dark and silent. But something enormous loomed above it, peeking over the rooftop. Its head was massive, spanning nearly the length of the house. Its eyes, almost human, were wide with a sickening, gleeful anticipation. Two gigantic hands gripped the roof, giving the eerie impression of a child peeking over the edge of a table. The night seemed to glow, the darkness around its form almost painfully bright. Its two white eyes pierced through its black, human-like head, glowing like two full moons, the irises burning a sharp crimson, almost neon in their intensity. Just above the peak of the roof, I could make out its mouth. It was grinning, its massive square teeth seemingly bursting from the shadows of its pitch-black face. They gleamed, radiating with the same intensity as its eyes. The blinding whiteness of its teeth stood in stark contrast to the inky blackness of its head and hands, making them appear even darker. It remained motionless, and the world around me seemed to melt away like wax in a fire. My gaze was locked with its fixed on whatever monstrous thing it was, and its smile only grew wider. Its eyes never blinked, two perfectly round, shining orbs that seemed to dig into my brain and unleash every fear I had ever known. I waited for something, anything to happen, my mind teetering on the edge of panic, ready to scream or faint at any moment. It just stared, grinning, its mouth stretching unnaturally wide, its long, dark fingers subtly shifting on the roof every few seconds, as if it too was waiting. Then a voice called my name, faintly from the crack in my bedroom door. I whipped around, a scream already rising in my throat. Through the slightly open door, I saw an impossibly large eye and half a smile, with one midnight black hand reaching through to grip the wood. I threw myself toward my bed, burying myself deep in the covers, trembling and crying. I heard the door creak open and Trevor stir on the floor. Slowly, I peeked from my refuge and saw it. It was standing in the doorway, a tall, human-shaped figure. Its skin swirled in an endless dance of dark colors like wet paint, blending together in real time. Its face had the same fluid texture, with a massive eye rising and sinking in and out of its surface. Its mouth formed from the same shifting texture, a twisted grin that seemed to form and unform itself over and over. Then it spoke. Its voice was a chorus of many voices, overlapping and distorting like multiple vocal cords filtered through running water. I shrank deeper into the covers, every part of me wanting to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat, stifled by pure fear. I heard a movement, followed by a thump and the sound of something being dragged across the floor. I shifted in my cotton cocoon, sweat soaking my skin, my body trembling, desperate to call out for my parents. I dared another glance, hoping it would be gone. My room was empty. Trevor and his sleeping bag had vanished. I tore myself free from the bed, my heart pounding like a drum. I heard Trevor starting to stir in the hallway. His voice was muffled, confused, barely audible. Then I could hear his tone shift, growing frantic, like a dark flower blooming in his panic. I begged my parents to wake up, shutting my eyes tight and willing it to happen. I heard heavy footsteps and the dragging sound retreating down the hallway. Then I heard him cry, his voice soft and distant, fading into the night. The front door slammed open with a violent crash, making me jump and let out a small, frightened sound. I could hear the monster and Trevor fading into the distance. I rushed to my window, feeling tears start to well up in my eyes. The creature had Trevor trapped inside his sleeping bag, dragging him across the porch and through the field toward the house. The enormous black figure loomed over them, its teeth gleaming in the moonlight, eyes wide with a terrifying excitement. It didn't look back as it continued its relentless march across the field. I watched in horror as the front door opened by itself. The darkness inside seemed to seep out, swallowing the night whole. And then I screamed. I screamed until my voice cracked, a high-pitched shriek of terror. From the back of the house, I heard my parents stir in their room as the creature entered the greenhouse. Dad burst into the room, and I saw Trevor squirming frantically inside his sleeping bag, disappearing as the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him in that horrible house with that thing. It grabbed me by the shoulders, shaking me, demanding to know what was wrong, what had happened. Tears streamed down my face. I stole one last glance at the house in the field. It vanished. That was 20 years ago. That night, my parents called Trevor's family and then the authorities. I kept telling them what I had seen over and over, but no one believed me. It was treated as a kidnapping, and in the following months, an extensive investigation was launched. Trevor's family never spoke to ours again. My parents never returned. Neither did Trevor. It wasn't until 2 days ago when I received a phone call at work from the office telling me they had found someone. They said it was a child. The child kept asking for me from his hospital bed. They said my name was the only thing he would say. I hadn't thought about that house in the field or Trevor in years. As soon as the officer finished speaking, I knew exactly who the child was. It was Trevor. I rushed to the hospital, a whirlwind of anxiety and confusion. At the hospital, the police questioned me as soon as I arrived, asking for my full name, birth date, and where I worked. Once they were satisfied, they told me I could see the child, but only under police supervision. Something felt off, though. They seemed rattled. Just as I was about to enter the room where Trevor was, the officer escorting me placed a hand on my shoulder. He told me to prepare myself, that what I was about to see might be deeply unsettling. Uncertain and slightly disoriented, I stepped into the room. A small child lay on the bed, his chest rising and falling with every labored breath. The only way I could guess his age was by his size. He was entirely covered in a smooth white coating. His eyes, his mouth, his bare scalp, everything about him was obscured by this strange, glossy layer. He looked like a mannequin sculpted from hardened snow-white clay, polished and slick. He turned his head toward me, and in a voice I instantly recognized, he said my name. The sound hit me like a wave, pulling me back into childhood memories that crashed over me with overwhelming nostalgia. It was Trevor. I moved closer to the bed, pulling a chair up to his side, my hands trembling as I reached out toward his. My voice faltered as I spoke his name, my mouth suddenly dry. I asked him what had happened, how long it had been. 20 years. It can't be. It will happen soon. What will happen? They're coming. Who? The Grins. They took my youth away. They will come as children. You're talking about what happened all those years ago? The monsters we saw? They will come as children. They will come between the colors. From between the colors, they will come as children. Please, help me understand. Where did you go? What happened in that house? They took me between the colors, took my years, took all those children's years away from them. All of them? So many houses, so many children. They're ready. They will come now as children. Who is coming? The Grins. You mean, what are the Grins? That thing we saw in the house? Please help me understand. They will walk among us, waiting until they've grown, waiting to reveal themselves. The darkness, red eyes, oh, such red eyes. They will come as children, and we will see them smile. We will watch them grow. The Grins, they will consume everything. They will eat the world out of existence. At one point, Trevor began to convulse, his body jerking and twitching. The nurses rushed in, pushing me out of the room as they tried to stabilize him. The police informed me I would need to leave for the day, but promised someone would come by to question me. He passed away later that night. What happened to my friend when he vanished into that house remains a mystery. I'll never know where he went, what they did to him. But what I do know, beyond any doubt, is that it was real. I can't explain it. I can't make sense of it. But the dark, towering creature with red eyes, that thing that came into my room, it was real. Trevor's last words lingered in my mind. They haunted me, filled with such certainty, such conviction. Ready, they will come as children. I pulled out my phone and dialed my wife. I needed to know what my son was doing.